Welcome to WizeUp. I'm Paul Arthur. Lots to talk about today. I mean, where is Alberta headed these days? As you know, the provincial budget clocking in with something like a $9.4 billion deficit. Oh, no worries. We can just, okay. And of course, we're going to have a number of referendum questions coming up in October, including some on immigration. And that is, of course, a great topic right there. A lot of people moving to Alberta. It's a good place to live, but are we unnecessarily subsidizing some of these immigrants? Yes or no? And of course, there'll likely be a question on Alberta separation. So where are we going there? All right, before we jump in, quick reminder to hit subscribe and tell your friends about us. Always appreciate that. We are joined today by Leighton Grey, one of my favorite guests here. He's one of Canada's top attorneys and host of the Grey Matter podcast. And it's a great podcast. I encourage you to tune in. Great guests. Great topics there. You can see him on X at Grey Matter Convo. And he's also the author of a new book. It's called Lies, Laws, and Liberties. Love the title, and it's definitely worth the read, okay? So Lies, Laws, and Liberties, and you can get that anywhere they sell books, Amazon, etc. So Leighton, good to have you here.
Oh, it's my pleasure as always, Paul. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, you bet. Well, why don't we start off with the budget here? $9.4 billion deficit, which apparently breaks the government's own fiscal rules, I'm told, which is kind of going, really? Why? Why would you do that? But anyway. Any thoughts there?
Well, several. One is that we're not getting what we were promised. We were promised a conservative government. And
right.
The basic principles of conservative government, as you know, Paul, are, limited government, reduction of public spending, reduction of the size of the public service, and essentially removing some of the restrictions, the red tape, regulation, things like that, so that the private sector can flourish, because it's the private sector that really drives the economy. Everybody knows this, and the marriage of conservative, budgetary principles and capitalism has kind of been the recipe for countries like Canada and the U.S. to ensure human flourishing. But when you see governments overspend, spend more money than they have, when you see a government that is gambling on the price of oil, that has private pet projects that it's spending a lot of money on, that is welcoming more people into the province than people can handle. Paul, people don't realize that in 2023, there was a survey, and of the top 10 cities in the United States and Canada that were welcoming immigrants, you don't get to an American city until number 8. Actually until number 9. The top 8 are all Canadian cities.
Wow.
And Calgary was number 2 and Edmonton was number 4. So that's the number of immigrants who are coming to North America. That's where so a lot of people, as you say, are coming to Alberta. But the real problem here is that Danielle Smith and her government, in my respectful view, are actually governing as liberals in terms of their fiscal policy. They're doing the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, Alberta, the government's saying, well, hey, we've got decreasing oil revenues, which is true, right? Now they may be bumped up now with the Iran war there, but an increasing population. So that's what's behind the deficit. Is it that? I mean, certainly that contributes toward it, or does Alberta simply have a spending problem?
I think it is a spending problem, but I also think there's a deeper policy at work here.
Okay.
I mean, remember that these are decisions that are being made about what kind of government we're going to have. And a big problem that we have in Canada is that all the provinces now, including Alberta, are copying the sort of Trudeau recipe. And the Trudeau recipe is right out of Albert Nock's 1935 book, Our Enemy the State. And that recipe is, as you grow and expand the size of government through expanding the size of the public service, through excessive spending and driving the state into debt, what happens is you expand the power of government. And that is a very intoxicating elixir for any government. And unfortunately, Danielle Smith and a UCP government have fallen into that temptation.
Well, yeah. I mean, for those of us who really like fiscal, soundness, if you will, we just go, you can't keep on going with deficits, right? It has an inevitable crash at some point. So where do we start cutting back? I mean, I think $13.8 billion going to healthcare, $10.8 billion to education, right? So where can we cut back on our spending? Again, there's all kinds of public demand, mainstream media demand for we need more services, etc. We just can't do without it, smaller classroom sizes and these kinds of things. I mean, some of those are maybe genuine needs, but I think sometimes they're wants more than needs. Any thoughts on where we can trim back on our spending?
Well, we have too many people entering the province, and
Yeah.
and the premier is at cross purposes here. I mean, I saw her on the Sean Newman podcast not too long ago, within the last couple of years, saying that she wanted to double Alberta's population within, during her tenure. And then now she's putting forth a referendum on immigration. And I mean, why is she putting forth a referendum? She has a majority government. If she wants to reduce immigration, she has a mandate to do that. Quebec has done that. So that's a huge problem. We just have too many people in Alberta, and our infrastructure cannot handle it. And so that's what's driving up the cost of education. That's why, we've got to build new schools. That's why we see the cost of healthcare. I think that we are going to see the end of the government funded monopoly on healthcare very soon. I think we're at the end of the line here.
Well, I think we have to, and we could do an entire show just on that, and I probably will here soon, because it's so important. Yeah, we throw money and more money and more money, and nothing changes. And then we look at some of the, again, the fear thing is we don't want to end up like the U.S. And I agree. I don't think we should be like the U.S., their system. But when we look at the hybrid systems they have around the world, in Europe, okay, go to Switzerland, you name it, Sweden, the U.K., they all have systems that work, measurably better than the system we have here. And it's a mixture of private and universal health care.
Yes. And, we actually do have a mixed system in Canada right now.
The
reality is you can pound on the American healthcare system. There's a rather large population of Canadians who are going to the United States for healthcare. That's just a reality.
It's true.
So we have a hybrid system already. We're just not recognizing it. But the only other country, developed country, that's doing it the way we're doing it is North Korea. That's not very good company, is it, Paul?
Oh, Lord help us. I mean that literally. Boy. Okay. Well, you touched on this, the October 19th referendum coming up here. So I got 2 pages here of, the questions. You got non-constitutional questions and constitutional questions, right? And the one you mentioned was, should Alberta have increased control over immigration for the purposes of decreasing immigration to more sustainable levels, prioritizing economic migration, and giving Albertans first priority on new employment opportunities? So, I mean, if we say yes to that, I guess that makes us racist right away, right? And here's another show, right? But I think a lot of Albertans go, yeah. Your thoughts?
Well, I have a couple of problems with what the premier is doing with the referendum. Number one is that she might be destroying the referendum entirely, because remember, the Supreme Court said in the 1998 reference on independence, on secession, that it had to be a clear question. And so when you bring in these other questions, you start to muddy the waters, especially when you have questions that talk about what we're going to do. Like the question on immigration is a question about what Alberta is going to do within Canada. Well, you have that on the same ticket as a question of whether or not Alberta is going to be independent. Mm-hmm. And that could potentially kill the independence referendum entirely. For example, we could get a positive result on the independence question, but results on some of the other questions that they can favor or that confuse that issue. And the federal government, the courts might go, well, we can't honor the independence result because it's not clear. It's vague. So that's a serious problem. And some, like Bruce Party, my friend Bruce Party, has suggested that maybe this is by design. I wouldn't go that far. I'm not, because I don't know what's in Daniel Smith's mind. But my bigger problem, Paul, with the referendum is this. You know, a lot of people in Alberta have been running around for years trying to get signatures and raise money to have a referendum on independence. And it took a heck of a lot of work to get there. There's still canvassers out there trying to get signatures.
Yep.
The referendum should not be a government tool. Danielle Smith was elected to majority government in 2023. She snaps her fingers and decides there's going to be a referendum. I don't see why we need a referendum. In fact, I think it's a waste of taxpayers' dollars. And really, it's a way to sort of offload responsibility for the question. She has a majority mandate. She has a majority government. If she thinks that that we have excessive immigration, her government has a mandate to act already. She doesn't need a referendum. So
right. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Leighton, because I think a lot of viewers don't realize that there is the legal power and the mandate, like you say, with the majority government to actually do that without a referendum. And I think perhaps, again, the political angle comes in here, that if you get support from the public on a referendum, it makes it a lot more palatable, I guess. And, the mainstream media is going to have to, at least, give some sway to that, say, well, you know what, the majority of Albertans did vote for this, so, she's got, whereas she just does it, then she's the bully on the street sort of thing, the dictator, whatever, right? So I think that is maybe just politically a help to that. And I wonder, too, with the spending on the budget here, again, big dollars in education and on healthcare, those are typically the some of the biggest items on the ticket here when it comes to election time. And so then she'll be able to say, hey, look at where we're spending here, and vote for us, right? So, again, maybe it's expedient to do that. Your thoughts? I mean, if she did actually cut back on spending and rein in the debt like Ralph Klein did, could she possibly lose? Or, would it benefit her? Maybe people would say it's about time.
I happen to think it would benefit her, but she doesn't. I don't think that she believes that. There's a lot that I admire about Danielle Smith. I think she's a very astute politician. She's a very smart lady. I think she genuinely cares about people.
I think so too.
But I would rather see her behave like Margaret Thatcher,
the Iron Lady.
Read the papers. She had a very clear idea of what was best for the British people. She went to the polls when she had to, and she was a very successful and very respected politician because she was governing with some sense of what was best for the people. I'm not a fan of this, this sort of populist idea that Danielle Smith seems to be ascribed to. And, I understand what she's thinking. She's thinking, well, if I'm not in power, then I can't do anything. But for me, if you're not doing good, then why are you in power in the first place? And so that's what I question here is, a lot of people, effectively, this budget increases property taxes for every Albertan.
Actually,
and most property owners in Alberta, let's face it, a lot of them don't have young kids, and they're questioning, why do I have to build schools? Who are we building schools for, Danielle? My kids are grown. Who are all these new schools for? And the answer is, the most popular baby name in Alberta right now is Mohammed.
Yes, I did see that. Technically, the stats people would argue, well, it's not, spelling, but it's variations. It's variations of how you spell Muhammad, but clearly it is. So again, it's dealing with immigration, right? So now, if you want to name your kid Muhammad, go ahead, please. Don't take any kind of flack from me. But but it's indicative of again the immigration we're having. Not just to Alberta, but to Canada. And again, we could do a whole show just on that, and maybe we need to do that soon. One of the other referendum questions coming up is that, a law mandating that only Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and individuals with an Alberta-approved immigration status will be eligible for provincially funded programs such as healthcare, education, and other social services. So again, you have this collision here, and even from the Christian population as well, because, we do see Scripture telling us to be compassionate, right? And that is part of who God is. And yet there's also, heaven apparently has some immigration rules as well. There's certain requirements needed. You just don't walk in, right?
That's right.
So how do we handle this? And any thoughts? I mean, it is certainly a drain on the finances of the province. So should there be some limitations?
Well, I think there has to be. And, if you think about the Lord's second commandment, was to love our neighbor as ourselves.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
am I loving you as my neighbor? If I tolerate massive numbers of people coming into the country, we're going to destroy our infrastructure, that are going to make cost of living impossible, that are going to destroy our healthcare system. Is that loving my neighbor? I don't think so. In fact, sometimes you can love your neighbor by giving them a compassionate no. I can't do that. I mean, Jesus said no to people, right? So certainly we can.
Well,
right?
I mean, for example, there's the whole idea, we see it often throughout Proverbs, don't become surety for somebody, if you don't have the money to do it with, right?
Yeah.
You're saying you're a fool to do that,
Yeah.
Get out of that thing. So, maybe
There's
a similar kind of
in
idea.
those Proverbs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wisdom in those Proverbs. But, the other problem with the way this is being sort of proscribed is that we've cheapened, and this is one of the really sad things we've done in our country, is we've cheapened the value of things like citizenship and permanent residency. And, the federal government is passing laws right now to make people who haven't even been in Canada, who aren't even born yet, Canadian citizens. That's how much we've cheapened that. And that's a very sad thing, because when you cheapen the value of citizenship, that's one of the ways that you destroy a sense of national identity. I think most Canadians who have lived here and grown up here have a very strong sense that sense of identity in our country is being eroded, and that's probably why we have multiple independence movements going on right now.
Well, speaking of independence movements, it looks quite likely. I don't have any hard numbers on that, but it looks like the separatist movement will get enough signatures. I'd be incredibly surprised if they don't. And I think they'll actually have a way over what they need. At least that's the sense I get here in southern Alberta. There's lots of people wanting to sign this thing. So, so that's going to be there, October 19th. And at this point, the polls I've seen show about 1/3 of Albertans willing to sign on to this, that we want to separate from Canada. Now, that's not anywhere near enough. Any thoughts on if that will change at all, especially if Prime Minister Carney, though he keeps on talking about, wow, this is a great opportunity here now, even with the Iran war, there's going to be more demand for Canadian energy, talking to India, we need to supply them with more, South Korea wants our natural gas, etc. So we can do that. But the funny thing is, you can't do that unless you build a pipeline, thank you. And that ain't happening, doesn't look like. So, if that doesn't happen, and the memorandum of understanding with Alberta falls through, will that potentially boost things through the roof to actually get over 50%?
Well, my take on this is maybe a bit different than what other people might say.
Okay.
You recall that in 2021, we actually had a referendum on independence. Only we called it an equalization referendum.
Oh, right.
Essentially,
yes. Gotcha.
62% of Albertans voted in favor of ending equalization.
Yeah.
And I happen to think that the result on the independence referendum is going to be about that. I think it's going to be somewhere between 60 and 65%.
You think it'll actually get that high? Really?
Yes. And
Wow.
I'll tell you why.
Okay, why?
I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
It's because of what happened with the equalization referendum. The Jason Kenney government and the Danielle Smith government have done precisely nothing with that result. And that's part of the problem with the referendum process, is that people know and they realize that even if they vote in favor of independence, it's more of a protest vote than an effective vote that will cause Alberta to no longer be part of Canada. People realize this. They know that on the day after they vote in favor of independence, Alberta is still going to be part of Canada.
Yeah.
And so it has that kind of safety cushion, if you will. And that's why I think that the vote in favor is going to be very high. My fear, I won't say fear, my concern is that Danielle Smith is openly not in favor of independence for Alberta.
That's correct.
I think so. I don't think that even if we get a very positive vote in favor of independence, that the Danielle Smith government is going to act on that. I think that they're going to continue to resist that, and in fact they're already doing it. Danielle Smith's vision for Alberta is within a federalist Canada. I should mention, though, there's going to be a very interesting debate tomorrow night on the Harrison Faulkner podcast, and people might, I don't know if this is going to happen, but
right, yeah, this will probably at the time of this taping, this is probably already have happened, but
former Premier Jason Kenney is going to have a debate with Bruce Pardy, who's a constitutional expert.
Oh wow,
on independence, and I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be very interesting. So.
That'd be worth watching for sure. Okay. Yeah, I mean, part of the problem here, I think, is too the Federal Clarity Act doesn't have a lot of clarity. Frankly,
ironically named. Ironically named, isn't it?
Yeah, they need to have a clear majority. Well, how clear is that if you don't define what a clear majority is?
Yeah.
That is just so it's so subjective, right? So is, 50.7 a clear majority? Well, mathematically it is, but I'm pretty sure that's not what they mean. So, I mean, you hear different legal pundits weighing in. Well, it's got to be at least 60. Others saying at least 70. Well, who knows? I mean, and if it's in the hands of the federal government, well, they'll set it wherever they darn well want to set it because they don't want Alberta to leave.
My point on this, Paul, too, is that as somebody who's spent some time studying our Constitution and its history, is that the independence movement is actually unnecessary. If you go back in 1881, the House of Lords, in a case called Parsons, actually said very clearly, this is what they said. It said that federal jurisdiction should be construed as applying to all regulations of trade and commerce which do not affect civil rights. But the local legislatures, the provinces, are empowered to deal with all questions of a local character. And basically what they go on to say is that Canada is a federation of separate states, and that all matters of property and civil rights, which would include just about everything you can think of, are within the exclusive jurisdiction of the provinces. So what I would say to Danielle Smith and to anyone else, I think the province of Quebec has proved this, that we already have the constitutional structures in place for Alberta to behave as a sovereign state. The simple truth is that for political reasons, for reasons of political convenience, they're not doing it. And so I mean, that's my point on the whole independence thing. I think it's actually it should be unnecessary given the constitutional structures we already have in place.
That's fascinating. So if I'm hearing you correctly, so Alberta could decide to do whatever it wants with private healthcare, for example. And
absolutely.
Now, the downside of that, they would probably not get those federal transfer payments, which we're putting into anyway.
The federal transfer payments that are being funded by equalization.
Exactly. So we could do that. We just have to do it on our own dime. Okay, let me take it a step further. Besides those kinds of things, could Alberta actually then, within our constitutional framework here, simply up and leave Canada and say, you know what, the U.S. is going to recognize us as a sovereign state, and we're just going to set up borders, and unless you're going to attack us with what's left of our Canadian military, we're just going to go separately. We're going to have to put up checkpoints, and too bad for you. Could they do it? I mean, that's obviously a hypothetical situation that's probably never going to happen, but could they do it?
Under domestic law, no. However, under international law, arguably yes. But what it would require is a declaration of independence.
Yeah.
And Alberta would need to be recognized by other states. I would think countries like the United States, for example, would probably recognize Alberta immediately as an independent state.
Mm-hmm.
And then that that would flow into something. But of course, but under domestic law, the answer is no. Alberta doesn't have jurisdiction to vote itself out. But, the federal government also clearly does not have authority to expand its own power. And our Supreme Court, all the way going back to the 1880s, has been very clear on this, because the federal government has been trying to expand its own power since the very beginning. The federal government, no federal government we've ever had in this country has liked the idea that we're a federation. They've always wanted to expand the power of the federal government, have a strong central government, and basically govern Canada the way Great Britain is governed. But Canada is not Great Britain. It's a huge country with vast differences in culture, in language, and you name it, economies. And the wise framers of our Constitution realize this. I think Canada is a better country when we are decentralized, when we don't have a strong central government, because the best government is usually the one that's closest to your door, because it's most in touch with what's going on in your life and what your needs are.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, you look at the culture of Ontario compared to the culture of Alberta. Very, very different.
Yeah, very different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the Maritimes, even Alberta and British Columbia in a lot of ways. But I'm talking about the West Coast of British Columbia.
Yeah. Well, of course.
Very different.
We won't have time to get into this in detail, but the whole, of course, the Cowichan ruling and now the Musqueam Indian Band agreement with the federal government that they're not giving us full details on. I mean, it looks like private ownership of land is under threat in British Columbia. This is absolute craziness. I'm running out of time here. 30 seconds. Any final thoughts on where we're headed here in Alberta and Canada?
Well, I think that we are going to have, as I said, I think we are going to have the referendum. I think we're going to see a mixed bag in terms of the answers that come through. I think that Albertans will vote in favor of independence, but I'm not convinced that the Clarity Act is the path to independence for Alberta. There may be a path to independence for Alberta, but that's not it. I think it's going to have to be a much harder, much bumpier road that's going to involve, I think, foreign interference in our affairs. But that's my take. But I think the most likely result is that we're going to negotiate some type of new arrangement with the federal government.
Well, it'll be fascinating to see what happens October 19th. Out of time here, Leighton Grey, our guest. Thank you so much, Leighton. Again, you can follow him on X at Grey Matter Convo. And appreciate all of you watching. And you can see all of our podcasts here, wiseup.ca, or watch on miraclechannel.ca as well. God bless.